We're here with our buddy Jim Trusty. Jim, how are you, my friend?
I'm good, great one. How are you?
Good. It's always a great pleasure to have you. I want to cover a couple subjects with you. First of all, Nick Mangione. Isn't this an open and shut case, or am I missing something?
Well, I mean, look, the biggest question right now seems to be jury nullification. You've got these lunatics across the country swooning over a guy who traveled across the whole East Coast to murder a father of two for no real rational reason. So, you know, I guess if you're cute, you can get away with a lot in this world, and he's apparently kind of cute, so he's got a cult following. But the evidence itself in terms of premeditation and agency and identity is, you know, slam dunk, easy stuff.
Mm-hmm. And it's right, I think, for the feds to go after the death penalty, don't you? I mean, he shot the man in the back and then leaned over him and shot him again.
Yeah, well, I have to tell you, I mean, I had a lot of experience dealing with death penalty cases at DOJ. I was on the Attorney General's Capital Review Committee. I personally got to review or had the responsibility of reviewing cases like the Charleston church shooter and the Boston Marathon bombing. There's some pretty horrific murders that make their way up to the top of the pyramid for the death penalty in federal court. I think what's interesting here, aside from kind of the jury selection problem, is that it's a little bit of a stretch on the charges to get federal jurisdiction. You know, Mark, you got to remember that murder is typically a local offense, and the feds have to have some sort of interstate connection, some sort of, you know, express express statutory authority. And here they're calling it essentially stalking, which requires that the victim have a reasonable apprehension that they're being stalked. So it's a little dicey. I don't know that that's going to be fatal to the case. It's going to come down to the jury instructions. But there's a little bit of a stretch here to get the jurisdiction, and sometimes that can poison the well with the judge a little bit when you're pursuing the death penalty.
Now, I don't know this area at all. So is it enough that he traveled across state lines to commit the murder?
Well, that's the big part of it. There's two interstate stalking type charges that are the first two counts, and they basically, that's easy. He came up from Georgia, you know, premeditating the whole way. The problem is it was originally designed to be like a domestic violence stalking statute. So you typically anticipated threats like the jilted boyfriend or ex-husband, you know, coming over the phone or emails or traveling and saying, I'm going to get you. And you don't really have that here. You have an ambush assassination. It's horrific. It's premeditated, but it's not really fitting on all fours with what you normally would see in an interstate stalking case. But that's what I mean. If the instructions say, hey, as soon as he was shot in the leg, he now has an apprehension of death, that's good enough. It's a little bit of a tight timing frame, but it's probably legit. So again, I haven't researched it deeply. I just know there's a little bit of an issue there. And then the third count, which is basically that there's a firearm involved in executing those first two counts, is what's actually a death-eligible charge federally. That's black-letter law. But what's happening right now is the defense is squawking and screeching about the internal DOJ process and running to the judge to complain they didn't have enough time. Well, you know, as you know, there's no constitutional right to some sort of internal process at DOJ. So, you know, Pam Bondi could sit there with a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and she'd be okay.
And which federal district is this? Is it the Southern District, the Eastern District? I don't recall.
I was looking at the indictment. I think it's Southern, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, they should know how to handle their cases if they want to. But is that the Manhattan area there? Is that our friend the DA there?
Yeah, that's the Manhattan for sure.
So we have the radical left-wing DA. Has he even spoken? I haven't heard him say a damn thing.
Well, remember, we're on the federal... Well, there is a state case, and that's sitting there for our friend Alvin Bragg to deal with. He's been quiet, and then the feds came in, perhaps not loving Alvin Bragg, and doubled up with the federal indictment on Thursday. So that's right now being, you know, handled by the interim U.S. Attorney for Southern District.
Now, you've worked in Maryland for good piece of your life. You see this guy Garcia, the longer this goes on, the more stuff's coming out about him. I mean, the public records alone, that we do in fact have the immigration law judge, an administrative judge, and the Board of Appeals both saying, yeah, pretty much, they think he's MS-13 despite his protestations. We now have the record where the wife in her own handwriting, I think it was 2019 or 2021, that he's a wife beater. We know he's here illegally. So basically what they're arguing over, that is the people defending them is really quite a technicality, isn't it? Because even if they bring him back and go through it again, he's out of here.
Yeah, he's not going to be spending any time in Maryland, and thank God. And by the way, with the peace orders that were sworn out by his wife, if you saw the way she talked to the media, it's almost like, remember Francis Gary Powers blinking torture when he was going through an interview? She has all of the signs of a battered spouse. And I used to do domestic violence cases too. So the idea that she's now saying, oh, no, he's not a gang member, don't worry about those tattoos, it doesn't ring as a particularly valid moment of testimony coming from her. So, look, the mistake here was a very limited mistake. The deportation order, the removal order, said you can send him anywhere but El Salvador. And that, of course, was because he was a gang member worried about retaliation from a rival gang. So the idea that he's got anything angelic about him is laughable. And frankly, there's to me, I'm really curious if there's a practical solution, which is President Bukele says, okay, fine, he's out of El Salvador, enjoy Guatemala. I mean, there's no reason why he couldn't just put him in another country and the whole thing becomes legally moot from my perspective.
Yeah. Or I guess they can say, okay, he's not a gang member. We're deporting him to El Salvador.
Right. Home country.
He says he's not a gang member, so what's the problem? No?
I mean, at best for him, he gets returned, he gets scooped up at BWI by ICE and marshals waiting for him, put in detention, has another hearing where he says, I really, really, really am not MS-13. They go, yeah, you're really, really not a citizen. Goodbye.
Yeah, exactly. He's out of here no matter what.
That's what I'm getting at. I don't see any avenue other than the most symbolic kind of Pyrrhic victory of coming back for a New York minute and being shipped right back out to some other country.
So So Jim Trusty, what is it with these judges? So she wants to have a hearing for 2 weeks through Easter, get these prosecutors under oath through depositions. I feel like these people are unhinged, almost, these judges.
Well, from my experience, there's an awful lot of echo chamber, even in judicial circles. And so if you are taking on the Trump administration, you suddenly are lifted to Medal of Honor status.
Yeah.
And I've just seen that in kind of social settings where it's amazing. There's just kind of a brazenness about it. And look, I don't think it's my personal view is the fight with judges is not the same as impeachment. Like, I didn't like hearing that thrown around, even though it was very much cheapened during the Trump presidencies when he was the object. But, right now there's this kind of, I don't know, defensiveness by the way of the bench where they're willing to take on fights that I'm not sure that's really part of their business.
By the way, America, Jim Trusty has a great blog site. Jim, tell them what your blog site is if people want to check it out. And Mr. Producer, put it on our platforms if you would.
Oh, sure, thanks. So it's at IFRA Law, that's my law firm, IFRAH, and then you drop down to Insights, and there's a little area called Crime in the Suites, because it's normally white-collar stuff. Mangione is pretty far away from that, but the blog is there. I've also got it on Substack, just under my name, so it's out there for people that might want to get a little bit of lesson about really the protocol, like the process that's involved in seeking the death penalty, including what the jury considers during the penalty phase.
Now, what does IFRA stand for?
It's not even an acronym. It's just the guy's name. It's the least marketable name in history, my friend Jeff IFRA.
I was going to say, yeah.
So you agree we should go with Trusty Law, right? Okay,
I would.
That on.
I like that a lot. Or Jim Law, something like that.
We like the challenge of having a hard-to-pronounce name.
Well, it's working. All right. Anyway, here's my question to you now. We've got really a lot of these judges that are just out of line. And that's not a knee-jerk comment. They just are. And Schumer says he put a lot of judges there to do what they're doing. What does the Supreme Court do, Jim Trusty? And can they afford to wait much longer to get this fixed? It just gets worse and worse as time goes on. It's harder to unravel, isn't it?
Well, yes and no. I mean, look, I think we both have talked about before how Justice Roberts, really shies away from these kind of politicized, divisive moments where the Supreme Court's going to get criticized from one side or the other. That said, lawfare, which continues unabated from the left, in just an outrageously creative and venue shopping way, it's got to get smacked down. I don't think the answer is impeachment. I don't think that's what's contemplated in the Constitution. Yeah, you can say, well, let's just let it.
But even if it is, it's not going to work because you're not going to get a supermajority in the Senate. So that's that.
It's literally a symbolic exercise right now. So look, I think the answer is this. Supreme Court. I think what they tried to do with this quote Maryland father was give a little bit of a gentle hint to Judge Exines and Greenbelt and say, hey, the administration actually has a little more power than you think to do these things. And I thought there was a little bit of a hint that they were curtailing her aggressiveness. It doesn't seem like anyone's taking the hint. So it's going to come right back up to the Supreme Court. And they've just got to find an avenue to take one of these cases and really blast out and maybe create a new expedited system where they say we're not going to tolerate endless Lilliputian efforts to tie up the executive branch.
And obviously, they can also say they can put an end to these national injunctions as well. And I wrote this book, Men in Black. It was the first book I wrote. I think I wrote it almost 20 years ago. There were no national injunctions. I didn't even address it in the book.
Right.
They just didn't occur. So there's really like a hyper level of these national injunctions now, and these judges are getting used to it. And I know Congress is working on it, the Republicans, but then again, the Democrats like what they're seeing from the judiciary, so they're going to make it very difficult to get a legislative fix. Seems to be the Supreme Court is uniquely positioned and purposely positioned to do something about it, and they've got it. He can't keep shying away. Let me put it to you this way. Let me ask this way. Do you think William Rehnquist will put up with this for long? Do you think he would care what the media say or what people in and around the court have to say? Don't you think he'd put his foot down?
I do, and I think there's a lot of other associate justices that weren't even the chief that are probably, feeling like they're twisting in the wind. Like, come on, boss, let's end this. I think there's an opportunity for the Supreme Court to basically say, look, equitable relief. Like when you talk about a temporary restraining order, that by itself is supposed to be unusual, much less expanding it to a preliminary injunction across the country. So just say from now on, you know what? It's the only people that are going to get relief are the parties to that case, not the entire country. So I think there's an easy and well-supported fix. It does seem like there's reluctance coming from Justice Roberts. Maybe he's hoping somehow he's going to get the 9-0 on these issues, but he's just not. And he's going to have to go out there and make it clear. And I think these are smart people on the bench. They can really write it up in a very persuasive, powerful way that all but the hardcore haters will understand is actually principled and correct.
Well, you're a good man. I hope you have a wonderful Easter, my friend, and a relaxing weekend. And it's always a pleasure. You're a good friend.
Well, thanks. I love being on with you, Mark. Let's keep going.
You're not kidding. Amen. Jim Trusty of the IFRA law firm. It's actually hard to forget. IFRAH, IFRA law firm.